Ghosts are perhaps the most common creatures of terror. Spirits of long-lost loved ones, or those who have succumbed to tragic events, or menacing souls unable to rest and let go of the world, are frequent in folklore all across the globe. The ghost is a reminder that we humans are mortal, that we will pass from this world, and our desires to remain a part of the living can disrupt those that have yet to move on. Something so traditional as the ghost is fitting for such a classic horror game, The Seventh Guest, an award-winning and best-selling PC title that popularized pre-rendered 3D graphics and live-action actors, and used the techniques to tell a chilling story of mystery and murder. The game's story is one of familiarity, but with enough of a unique twist that it injects both added anxiety and intrigue. Our tale begins in 1935 when a drifter named Henry Stoff enters the town of Harley-on-the-Hudson and murders a woman for her purse. That night, the scoundrel has a dream of a beautiful doll and is compelled the next morning to not rest until he carves it as perfectly as seen in his vision. Stoff sells this doll at a local tavern for food and shelter, and over the next few years, Stoff is greeted with more dreams of wooden toys for him to create. Becoming a successful toy maker, Stoff ventures out to the edge of town and constructs an elaborate mansion, again based upon his visions. It is only after his mansion is complete that the children who possess Stoff's toys begin to contract a mysterious illness and suddenly die. It is at this point that Stoff disappears inside his mansion, never to be seen again. Sometime soon afterwards, 6 seemingly unrelated people are invited to the Stoff mansion for a party. These include Martine Bourdin, a renowned singer, Julia Hine, an elderly alcoholic bank teller, Brian Dutton, a middle-aged business owner enamored with Stoff's wealth, Hamilton Temple, an eccentric and exotic magician, and Edward and Eleanor Knox, a couple dissatisfied with both their marriage and their lives. Each of these guests have seemingly met a tragic end inside the mansion, as their ghosts still haunt the building, reenacting the day in which they entered through the massive doors and subsequently vanished from the world. Players take control of a man named Ego, who awakens in the deserted Stoff mansion with no prior memories of how he arrived. In order to solve the riddles of the mansion's past, players must solve the puzzles that are located in each of the abode's rooms, and interact with the ghosts of the mansion's past victims, or else succumb to a similar fate as the Seventh Guest. Horror games, of course, have existed long before 1993, but most focused on action gameplay rather than attempting to imitate a cinematic experience. As technology in gaming grew even more impressive, game developers were able to more easily transport the player into a world of their making, and it is in these parameters that the developer can more easily strike fear into the hearts of those holding the controller. The Seventh Guest did this by expertly using 2 methods few gamers had seen before. The first thing that gamers will notice is the high-resolution 3D graphics that make up the rooms of the mansion. Prior to this time, games rarely had such detailed environments, and thus the Seventh Guest felt as close to reality as one could get in 1993. While Alone in the Dark, released a year prior in 1992, used this same method, the polygonal characters interacting with the detailed backgrounds created a much more cartoonish and game-like experience. Virgin Interactive, the makers behind the Seventh Guest, wanted to go much further. What's better to create the most lifelike gaming experience than to film real actors as the game's ill-fated cast of characters? The technical limitations of the time also worked in the designer's favor, as the grainy film quality of these actors enhanced their ghostly visuals. thus appearing even more haunting when they emerge to interact with the world around them. While visuals are perhaps what the game is most well known for, the puzzles that occupy each room are where players will spend the majority of their time. Unlike other popular adventure titles, such as King's Quest and The Secret of Monkey Island, The Seventh Guest employs logic-based puzzles that are confined to a single room rather than relying on searching for items to use elsewhere. The majority of these serve to reach deeper into the chilling undertones of the game's atmosphere. For instance, in one puzzle the player must ensure each of the previous 6 guests are served equal portions of this gruesome graveyard cake. In another, the player must direct these spiders to construct the perfect web. Perhaps most frightening are those where the player must spell out eerie sentences that spell out doom, coming across much like using a Ouija board to communicate with restless souls. The majority of these puzzles aren't daunting, but they can leave you scratching your skull for a while, consistently failing until that aha moment overcomes you and allows you to succeed. Still, the game offers very few clues as to what you should actually do in some of these trials. The ghastly voice of Stoff gives a cryptic hint that aims to guide you in the right direction, and he mocks you for your failed attempts. It can be forgiven in an age of the internet, when the solution to any riddle is just a search away. But when the game was released, many gamers were likely stuck for weeks on end, trying to uncover some of the mansion's mysteries. Although more lighthearted than the standard in Scares, The Seventh Guest oozes a classical horror feel that can best be described as Vincent Price meets Goosebumps. The eerily empty mansion and deliberate slow nature of the game will certainly make some players uneasy, but most of the scares come across as pure 90s cheese. Fortunately, The Seventh Guest wears its cheese like a badge of honor, recognizing even in the early 90s that being frightened is all in good fun. But not all are cheerful shrieks. There are indeed some disturbing imagery within Stoff's mansion, with troubling works of art hanging from the walls, and puzzles that can send shivers up your spine. As a new father, this instance in particular had my heart racing. Nothing will make a parent more frightened than the thought of harm coming to their little one, and The Seventh Guest pulls no punches when wanting to remind you that the children of this quaint town are no longer safe. The music in The Seventh Guest is composed by celebrated musician George Alistair Sanger, also known as the Fat Man. He is no stranger to the macabre, lending his talents to other horror-themed games, Maniac Mansion and Zombies Ate My Neighbors, as well as other classics like Wing Commander, Might and Magic 3, and SimCity 2000. The majority of the game's soundtrack is, in fact, one half-hour-long song that is chopped up to be used when appropriate during gameplay. Listening as a whole, Sanger has created a chilling suite that encompasses all of the game's terrifying events. Each of the mansion's guests, too, are assigned a musical theme, and their theme interrupts the score as they enter and exit scenes. There are a few frights in The Seventh Guest. The terrors are there, hiding in the shadows of a puzzle game and creeping up on the unsuspecting players like a hungry creature of the night. While The Seventh Guest is tame by today's standards, it's easy upon reflection to see why the game was considered a triumph at the dawn of 3D gaming. Do not let its age fool you, for despite the cheesy nature of the live actors and the dated visuals, The Seventh Guest can still rile up even the most seasoned of horror veterans.